When dreams are shattered, some people choose to shatter the world in return. This is exactly what gave birth to Hitler. The rejection by the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna destroyed his dream of becoming an artist and set him on the path to becoming history's most infamous dictator. Now, the hidden details of his early life, revealed by his childhood friend, will shock you and change the way you see him forever. The Meeting of Two Souls. In 1904, a young Adolf Hitler went to the Linz Theater to watch Wagner's The Flying Dutchman. The place was crowded, and everyone was trying to find a spot to stand. August Kubizek, a shy young man with a love for music, was there too. By chance, they ended up standing near each other. They both loved music and art, and that small shared interest became the start of a strong friendship. Kubizek noticed something unusual about Hitler. He was quiet at first, but when he spoke with a passion and focus that was hard to ignore. His eyes seemed to hold a fire, and his mind seemed full of ideas bigger than the world around him. From the very beginning, their friendship was built on music and culture. Kubizek, who was more open and friendly, liked how serious Hitler was about everything. Hitler loved German culture and admired its history. He also hated how Austria was run. Even as a young man, he felt strongly that the country was weak and unfair. Kubizek listened as Hitler talked about these ideas and sometimes felt worried about how extreme they were. They spent many hours together walking around Linz, talking about music, buildings, and paintings. Wagner's operas were Hitler's favorite. Kubizek noticed that Hitler didn't just like the music. He was inspired by the stories of heroes, struggles, and victories in Wagner's plays. Hitler often imagined himself in those stories, as if they showed the life he wanted to lead. These talks revealed the strength of Hitler's imagination and the beginnings of ideas that would shape his future. Even though Kubizek admired Hitler's determination and dreams, he started noticing some strange and worrying habits. Hitler was extremely focused, sometimes too much, and he could become angry if someone disagreed with him. He was very firm in his beliefs and did not like to consider other opinions. Kubizek began to see signs of intensity and mood swings that were not normal for most young men. Despite this, they stayed close. They supported each other, shared ideas, and spent a lot of time together. For Kubizek, these were exciting times, full of friendship and creativity. For Hitler, these moments helped shape his character and his future ambitions. But as their friendship grew, Kubizek began to see even more troubling traits in Hitler. These were small at first, but they were hints of the harsh and dangerous path he would follow. Let's tell you what he observed in Hitler. The dream of artistic glory. Hitler's dream of becoming an artist was one of the most important parts of his early life. From a young age, he loved drawing and painting. He was fascinated by buildings, landscapes, and the way things looked. He spent hours sketching every detail he could see. For Hitler, art was not just a hobby. It was a way to express himself and a path to the life he wanted to live. He wanted to study at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, believing that this was the first step toward a bright and successful future. When the time came to apply to the Academy, he was nervous but confident. He believed in his talent and in the careful practice he had put in over the years. However, his confidence did not protect him from the disappointment he faced. The Academy rejected him not once but twice. Kubizek, his close friend, remembered how deeply Hitler took these rejections. He was silent for hours, sometimes days, staring at his sketches and questioning why the world had not recognized his talent. Kubizek tried to comfort him, reminding him that many great artists faced rejection, but Hitler could not shake his frustration. These failures affected him more than anyone could have expected. He began to blame others for his misfortune. He mentioned Jews in conversations with Kubizek, blaming them for controlling opportunities and for standing in the way of his artistic career. At first, Kubizek thought Hitler was exaggerating. He did not realize that these thoughts were the beginnings of much darker beliefs that would grow over time. Even as a young man, Hitler could hold on to grudges and let them shape his view of the world. Despite these struggles, Kubizek remained a supportive friend. He spent time with Hitler discussing art, history, and ideas about Germany's culture. They often walked through the streets of Linz, talking about buildings and monuments, imagining what Germany could become if it were led by strong and talented people. These walks revealed Hitler's intense imagination and his ability to dream big, but they also showed Kubizek how focused and obsessive Hitler could become. Every conversation seemed to circle back to Hitler's vision for the world and his role in it. During this period, Hitler's ideas began to shift. He started talking more about politics, about Germany needing to be strong and united. He expressed disdain for the way Austria was run and imagined a country where Germans could take their rightful place in Europe. Kubizek listened, sometimes with admiration for Hitler's energy, but often with unease. The conversations were exciting, but also disturbing. Hitler's words were becoming more radical. He spoke with certainty that Germany must rise above other nations, and that some people were obstacles to this vision. Kubizek realized that the boy he had admired for his talent and passion was slowly developing ideas that could be dangerous. Even as they shared dreams of Germany's greatness, the friendship began to change. Hitler's bitterness from rejection combined with his growing political ideas made him more intense and difficult to reason with. Kubizek felt both loyalty and concern. He wanted to stay by his friend's side, but he could no longer ignore the intensity of Hitler's thoughts. He began to wonder if supporting Hitler was truly safe. As Hitler's rhetoric became more radical, Kubizek's loyalty was tested, and he began to question the true nature of their friendship. This was the turning point in their relationship. The break with reality. As Hitler grew older, his dreams and ambitions began to take over every part of his life. Kubizek recalled how he watched his friend slowly become consumed by his own ideas. It was no longer just about art or Germany's greatness. Hitler started speaking constantly about destiny and fate, as if some higher power had chosen him for a special mission. Kubizek noticed that the boy he had once walked the streets of Linz with, dreaming of art and music, was changing. The young man now seemed convinced that his life had a singular purpose, one that he must follow at any cost. Hitler began to see himself as a leader destined to guide Germany and the German people. Kubizek remembered conversations where Hitler spoke with absolute certainty that he was meant for something extraordinary. He did not see his failures in art or the struggles he faced in life as setbacks, but as signs that the world was preparing him for greatness. Kubizek admired his friend's confidence, but he also felt uneasy. The certainty with which Hitler spoke often seemed far beyond what a young man should believe. Kubizek began to worry that Hitler was losing touch with reality. This obsession with his mission started to isolate Hitler. He became less interested in normal friendships, less willing to share his life with others. Kubizek noticed that even their walks and conversations, once filled with laughter and music, were now dominated by Hitler's single-minded talk of power, destiny, and the future of Germany. People who disagreed with him or did not share his intensity were pushed away, and even Kubizek sometimes felt that he could no longer reach the friend he had once known. The man who had been full of energy and charm was now consumed by ideas that seemed larger than life, leaving him alone in his certainty. Kubizek also saw that Hitler's moods had grown unpredictable. Sometimes he would speak with calm intensity, explaining his visions and plans as if they were already written in history. At other times, he became restless, irritable, or lost in thought for hours. Kubizek tried to reason with him and offer support, but he realized that logic and conversation had little effect. Hitler's mind was focused on his mission, and nothing else seemed to matter. Kubizek began to fear that the path his friend was taking could be dangerous, not just for himself, but for the people around him. This period marked a turning point in their friendship. Kubizek had to confront a difficult truth. The person he had once admired for his talent, his passion, and his vision was now someone whose ideas were becoming extreme. Supporting him fully felt uncertain, but stepping away was painful. Kubizek struggled to balance loyalty with fear. He saw that Hitler's detachment from reality was growing stronger every day, and he could not ignore it. As Hitler's detachment from reality deepened, Kubizek faced a harrowing decision that would alter the course of their friendship forever. The final separation. In 1908, the lives of August Kubizek and Adolf Hitler began to move in very different directions. Kubizek was sent away to pursue his own career in music, and the two friends parted ways. The streets of Linz, that once echoed with their shared conversations and laughter, now seemed empty without the presence of the young man who had become so central to Kubizek's daily life. Kubizek later reflected on how difficult it was to leave Hitler behind, knowing how obsessed his friend had become with his own ambitions. He could not have guessed that the boy he knew would grow into one of the most notorious figures in history. During this period, Hitler's attention shifted in other directions, particularly towards women. Kubizek observed Hitler becoming infatuated with a young woman named Stephanie Isaac. Kubizek watched as his friend admired the young woman from afar, but did absolutely nothing to gain her affections or even introduce himself. It is very likely that, until his later notoriety as a political agitator and would-be revolutionary in 1923, Miss Isaac did not even know of Hitler's existence, and later married an Austrian army officer. For Hitler, women were to be admired distantly, never to be engaged with, or, worst of all in Hitler's view, slept with. On one occasion, when Kubizek brought a female friend back to their flat in order to teach her some music, Hitler flew into a rage that Kubizek dared do so immoral a thing as engage in a relationship with a woman. When Kubizek tried to calm his friend by telling Hitler that the young lady was a friend and pupil, Hitler's rage turned instead to the subject of women learning, which he called a complete waste of time and effort. In Kubizek's view, Hitler was an out-and-out misogynist. He celebrated the fact that women were not permitted in the stands of Vienna's theaters and opera houses, and believed that education and pursuit of artistic ambitions should be reserved for men alone. These views would later become evident during Hitler's 12-year rule of Germany. But it was not only women that Hitler would rant about at length to Kubizek. Every single opinion that entered Hitler's head was turned into a 20, 30, or even 40-minute monologue, with the length of the lecture directly proportionate to Hitler's dislike. Theatrical performances of which he disapproved would be given the most thorough lambasting, especially when the performance had been of Wagner, which to Hitler was akin to holy text. What is perhaps most curious is that during this time period, Hitler seems to have had no particularly strong feelings about Jews. He was, it seems, about as anti-Semitic as just about everyone in Europe at that time, and certainly was not yet possessed of the violent, murderous, paranoid, apocalyptic hatred of them that would later cause the deaths of many millions of people. Kubizek's music career required him to leave Linz, creating a physical separation from Hitler that marked the end of their close friendship. Over the years, Kubizek would hear little from Hitler. Decades later, Kubizek would be forced to confront the nightmare of history as his old friend became the most infamous dictator in the world. The boy he had admired, walked with, and confided in had grown into a figure whose actions would cast a shadow over the entire planet. The return of the prodigal friend. For 30 long years, August Kubizek and Adolf Hitler did not see each other. When Kubizek returned to Linz that September, he discovered that Hitler had moved out without leaving an explanation or a forwarding address. At the time, Kubizek had no idea that Hitler was living on the streets of Vienna or in homeless shelters struggling to survive. Meanwhile, Kubizek continued his life in music, studying diligently at the conservatory and completing his studies in 1912. He eventually became the conductor of the Marburg Orchestra, fully dedicating himself to the art he loved. His musical career, however, was interrupted by the outbreak of the First World War in 1914. Kubizek married Anna Funke and joined the 2nd Infantry Regiment of the Austro-Hungarian Army. He went to the front lines and was wounded in action in 1915. He spent several months recovering in Budapest before returning to the war with a mechanized infantry division. Despite the horrors of combat, Kubizek survived. After the war, he became an official with the Municipal Council of Eferding. Music remained a passion, but it was no longer his career. Even as Kubizek built his life, he followed the political rise of his old friend with a mixture of curiosity and unease. He watched from a distance as Hitler grew from a struggling artist into a powerful political figure. They had no contact until 1933, when Kubizek learned that Hitler had been made Chancellor of Germany. He decided to send a letter of congratulation, unsure if he would receive a reply. When it came in August, Hitler wrote, "I should be very glad to revive once more with you those memories of the best years of my life. That single sentence opened a door that had been closed for decades. In 1938, following the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria by Germany, Hitler and Kubizek finally met again at the Hotel Weinzinger in Linz. For over an hour, they spoke about the past, their youth, and the years that had separated them. Hitler offered Kubizek the opportunity to conduct any orchestra he chose, a gesture of both friendship and power. Kubizek politely declined, having chosen a different path in life. Hitler insisted on funding the education of Kubizek's 3 sons, an offer he accepted gratefully. That same year, Kubizek was commissioned by the Nazi Party to write 2 pamphlets recounting Hitler's early life. One account even described Hitler's youthful infatuation with Stephanie Isaak, who decades later was stunned to learn of the attention she had once inspired. Kubizek was struck by the contrast between the man he had once known and the tyrant who now held immense power. Seeing Hitler in Munich commanding attention and loyalty from all around him left Kubizek both awed and horrified. The boy who had once walked the streets of Linz with dreams of art had become a man whose vision had grown into a nightmare that affected millions. Kubizek could not reconcile the friend he had loved with the dictator before him. In the shadow of the swastika, Kubizek found chilling truths about the man he once called a friend. The memories of their youth, filled with music and dreams, were now inseparable from the fear and devastation that Hitler's rise had caused. These truths would haunt Kubizek for the rest of his life, leaving him to wrestle with the terrifying knowledge of how close he had been to the boy who became one of history's most infamous figures. The Confessions of a Friend. In 1939, Adolf Hitler invited August Kubizek to attend the Bayreuth Festival as his guest. The festival, held every year in Bavaria, celebrated the life and works of Richard Wagner, the composer whom both men admired passionately. For Kubizek, who had shared a lifelong love of music with Hitler, the invitation was extraordinary. He later described those 2 visits in 1939 and 1940 as the happiest hours of my earthly existence. For a brief moment, it seemed that their friendship, though stretched by time and distance, had been restored to the simple joys of art and music, just as it had been decades earlier in Linz. Their final meeting came on July 23, 1940. By then, Hitler had become the most powerful man in Germany, and the world was at war. During their conversation, Hitler expressed disappointment that the ongoing conflict had delayed his plans for building Germany into what he envisioned as a great empire. Despite the vast differences in their lives and the horrors that were unfolding around them, Kubizek remained connected to his old friend, observing the man behind the power and privilege. Their correspondence continued in small gestures. Each year, Hitler sent Kubizek's mother a food basket for her birthday, a reminder of personal loyalty amid global chaos. As the war progressed, Kubizek found himself drawn almost reluctantly into the political orbit of his friend. In 1942, with Germany facing setbacks and public support for Hitler beginning to waver, Kubizek joined the Nazi Party. He later admitted that his decision was not motivated by political beliefs, but by loyalty to a friend who had once been central to his life. The following year, Martin Bormann, head of the Reich Chancellery, asked Kubizek to write a memoir detailing his friendship with Hitler. The project initially lost priority for both men, overshadowed by the war and other concerns, but the seed of Kubizek's future account had been planted. After the war, Kubizek faced scrutiny and danger. He hid the keepsakes from his time with Hitler, including letters and drawings, shortly before being arrested by American forces. His home was searched, and he was interrogated at Glasenbach prison, yet the most intimate records of his friendship were never found. He was released without charge in 1947, and the experiences of his youth remained with him. In 1953, Kubizek finally published his memoir, Adolf Hitler, My Childhood Friend. In it, he laid bare the intimate details of his early friendship, recounting both the joys and the warning signs he had once missed. The memoir offered rare insights into Hitler's youth, the development of his character, and the personal dynamics that shaped one of history's most infamous men. Kubizek reflected openly on his feelings of guilt, wondering if he could have recognized the danger sooner or intervened to change the path of his friend. Kubizek's life came full circle in recognition of his musical talents. In January 1956, he was named the first honorary member of Eferding's Musikverein. He died later that year, aged 68, leaving behind a unique record of friendship, loyalty, and historical witness. His memoir stands as both a confession and a historical document, reminding the world that the seeds of tyranny can be sown in the most unlikely of friendships. As Kubizek's revelations come to light, the world is forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that the boy he once called a friend carried within him the potential for both brilliance and unimaginable destruction. What do you think about Kubizek's story and his unique perspective on Hitler's early life? Share your thoughts in the comments below.